Hello, everyone, and welcome to Orthodoxy. My name is Andy Schmidt, and we are back with another podcast episode. It's just me here today. Thought that it would be interesting to do a sort of reaction, recap, sort of video or podcast related to the Wisconsin Supreme Court election that just happened yesterday. So right now, at the time of recording this, it's 10:45 p.m. on Tuesday night, right after the election has taken place. It's been called for Suzanne Crawford. She was going up against Brad Schimmel being the more conservative, the Republican, Suzanne Crawford being the Democrat, endorsed by the Democrats, the more liberal judge. Haven't done anything like this before, really, but I think with wanting to do some more political stuff and wanting to move in that direction while continuing to be theologically accurate and Christian, I think these are the sorts of things that it's important to talk about. And then, obviously, I've grown up, lived in Wisconsin my entire life, moved to Minneapolis for a couple of years, but generally speaking, have been in Wisconsin, been heavily involved in Wisconsin my entire life. And so this election is right in my back door. I'm here in Dane County in the Madison, Wisconsin area. Madison, very liberal, very progressive place. Wisconsin as a state tends to be a swing state. You never know which way it's going to go. 2024 election went for Trump, but then the gubernatorial race went for the Democrats, went for Tony Evers, which, that was 2022. I believe that went for Evers. 2024, not the gubernatorial race, but the senator race here with Eric Hovde being the Republican lost to Tammy Baldwin, which was a very, very close one. But a weird situation where Trump won the Republican presidential race here in Wisconsin, and then the Senate race was lost by Republicans. I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that sort of thing is happening. But this is Suzanne Crawford, Brad Schimmel. I did not think it was going to be this big of a blowout. As of the time of recording this, 91% of the votes are in, 54.4% are in favor of Suzanne Crawford, and Schimmel has 985,803 votes, which is 45.6% of the vote in Wisconsin. Predictable in some cases. Dane County went heavily for Suzanne Crawford, 82%. You have Milwaukee County, 73% for Crawford. Kenosha County or Waukesha County was a very important county, and Schimmel won it 58-62. But I think from who I was listening to, they were saying that he needed to get over 60%, over 61%, and he just did not do that. Brown County went for Crawford, 52-48%. Green Bay, or I'm trying to find. It's hard to find some of these here. I'm on the New York Times map, but you see, Sauk County, which is a little bizarre. I mean, I guess it's close to Dane County, but sometimes I feel like growing up, I lived in Sauk County. I feel like it used to be a little bit more red. Went 57% for Crawford. So anyways, it's a decided victory. She's up by 9 points. She'll probably win by 7 or 8 points. So very, very disappointing. Wasn't expecting it to be this big of a blowout, so that's kind of frustrating. But I'm going to get into sort of why this is such a big deal and why this is sort of a prophetic election, going to tell us what's going to happen moving forward for the Republican Party, because people are flabbergasted. They can't figure out how in the world did Trump win in 2024, but Hovde loses in 2024, and now Schimmel loses in 2025. Like, what's happening here in Wisconsin and in some other swing states where Trump wins, but then the other candidates lose? Why is that happening? How is it happening? I obviously have opinions as to why that's happening and how that's happening, but it's right now we just have to deal with the fact that is what's happening, and it's a very, very frustrating thing. So I think that the big thing, though, that I am going to talk about here, so I have three things I want to hit on. So what does this mean for the Republicans going forward and for conservatives going forward? And then I want to talk about Crawford and her pro-abortion stance and the fact that she and her husband hate homeschool homeschooling and want to just get rid of it completely and bring it under the control of the state, which is a horrifically terrible thing. And then finally, I want to talk about what I think needs to be talked about, which is the fact that many pastors in Wisconsin, in Dane County, in Milwaukee County are cowards. They are evil, and they don't care about the truth, and they don't care about the fact that states and counties are being destroyed, and they're willing to allow for babies to be slaughtered and murdered. And I'm just going to keep hitting on this forever because I think it's the worst possible thing that has ever happened in any civilization in human history. The amount of babies that we've murdered, the fact that we're butchering kids, that's even a conversation that we're having, that we're cutting kids' genitals off. And that's just disgusting. The whole thing is evil, and pastors here in Dane, I know that for a fact, pastors here in Dane County will say nothing about it. I know most pastors around the state don't really talk about this, especially the big mega churches, the big non-denominational churches, the big evangelical free churches. They don't want to talk about the fact that there are many people within their congregations who are voting for baby murdering, child sacrificing, child butchering, sociopathic, narcissistic, evil, vile, and sick politicians. And I think that's a major problem. So we'll talk about that at the end. I don't want to get too much into it right now, but what does this mean for Republicans moving forward? I think one of the interesting things about the 2024 election with Donald Trump that I was not a big fan of, and something that was very alarming, was the Republicans linking arms with unions. So you saw at the RNC convention, if you watched that, if you wasted your time and watched the RNC convention, it wasn't really that good, to be completely honest with you. You had some lady praying some Hindu prayer, and that was sort of weird. You know, the Republican Party has generally been the more evangelical, more Christian party. Now we're doing Hindu prayers. I don't like that personally. I think the United States is a Christian country. It was founded with Christian roots. And I don't think that we should be doing Hindu prayers. I just don't like any of that stuff. And I could get into the specific reasons, but I'll just kind of move that to the side for right now. The big thing was that we didn't really have a prominent evangelical person talk at the RNC convention, but you did have the Teamsters union president give a speech. And if any of you know anything about politics, the Republicans have been the party for a long time that has been against the unions, because unions are inherently immoral. Unions are inherently selfish. They take the means of production. They pretend that the means of production, that the entirety of a business's idea or the philosophy of a business or the actual let's say Apple with the iPhone or with the MacBook, that they think, the workers think that should be under their jurisdiction and their control, even though they weren't the ones who created the idea, who created the philosophy behind the idea, who created the engineering behind the creation of these products. They think that they should be in charge of the product, that they should run the production, that they should be able to unionize and take power over the people who have actually created the products and services and goods that everyday Americans use. And so what happens in unions, and people should look this up, you should already know this, but unions are it's basically just theft. And so if I start a business and I'm creating, Teslas or cars, if I'm Elon Musk, I create Tesla, and I've got, a bunch of manufacturing and a bunch of industrial manufacturing sites all over the country. And you've got people working at these places, and a group of them come together and they say, hey, we don't like that we're not paid X amount of money. We don't like that we don't get the stock options. We don't like that we don't get this certain healthcare plan, yada, yada, yada. And we feel like we give too much to this company and that they couldn't do it without us. And so we're going to unionize. We're going to bring a bunch of us together. We're going to unionize, and we're going to basically take control of a certain percentage, certain portion of this company, and we're going to demand certain rights. And they have actually the legal jurisdiction, they have the legal right to do that in some cases, not in every case, but in some cases. And that's obviously stealing how a naturally should work out in sort of a open or more free market, not a completely free market, is that those people who are unhappy with their jobs, who are unhappy with their position, should go go and ask for, hey, I want a raise, or hey, I want this certain plan for healthcare plan, or whatever the problem is. And if they get a rejection, then go to a company that they like. Hopefully, if I'm the owner of a company and I see a bunch of people leaving my company and I can't replace those spots that they're leaving, those jobs that they're leaving, maybe then I'll consider actually giving the people what they want. But you can't just go and take the business away from somebody just because you don't like the fact that you don't get the benefits that you want, or you don't get the salary that you want. That's called stealing. That's immoral. That's wrong. And the union ideology, the union economic philosophy is rooted in the idea that if you don't get what you want at your job, but you don't want to go look for a new job, you can just steal the company. That's just what you can do. You get a bunch of people together, unionize, and steal the company. You think of one example a couple of years back when some people, I don't know if at Barstool Sports with Dave Portnoy were talking about unionizing. Maybe they were mentioning unionizing, but Dave Portnoy went out and said basically if anybody unionizes, they're going to be fired immediately. And AOC went crazy because AOC is a socialist. She's a communist. She went absolutely wild, said we could, you can't say that, blah, 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 blah. These people have a right, whatever, but nothing ever happened. Nothing ever came of it. But unionizing is theft. It is stealing. And it's always been against sort of the moral conservative bedrock structure and framing of the Republican Party. The fact that our economic policy is definitely more on the free market side, and definitely not in favor of unions. We could get into a lot of different details here with unionization, but generally speaking, I can't think of a single situation in which unionization is acceptable, especially in 2025. And so a lot of the unions have voted Democrat just because the Democrats have promised to be in favor of unionization, and we'll back them in the courts, and we'll back them legally, and we'll back them from the top down, the executive branch down. So this is something that was very surprising, that Trump and that the Republicans linked arms with the unions and decided to bring the unions under this broad populist sort of movement that the Republicans had put together under Donald Trump to beat the Democrats, to beat Kamala Harris and the Democrats. And I personally didn't like it. I thought that was a very foolish idea, not because I didn't want the Republicans to win. And to be honest with you, I'm not sure if they would have won had they not had the favor of the unions, but because I don't think that sets us up for an actual future as a party that doesn't give us any sort of philosophy. And that's sort of the issue that we're going to start running into when you see the Republicans, or the so-called conservatives, try to run for more offices across the country over the next several years, midterms, and even in 2028. You're going to see that the Republican Party is no longer a party of principle, which I know the argument has been, it hasn't been a party of principle for a long time. And that is true to some extent. That said, things like abortion, things like, not being in favor of unions, things like not being in favor of transgenderism, things like, being a more open market, that those things have always been more Republican talking points, Republican beliefs. And under the Trump administration, that has all changed because the Democrats overplayed their card. And so in 2024, the Republicans became the never Democrat party rather than the conservative party. And so that means that the sort of Republican Party became this broad tent, and there are so many people within it right now, and it's bursting at the seams, and we're going to see it completely implode because Republicans have no cohesive, clear vision forward other than Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is done after these 4 years. And then you've got what? You've got J.D. Vance, who I personally like, who's actually, I think, more of a post-liberal, which I think is the right political philosophy. But is the rest of the country going to be okay with that? Because Donald Trump he's pro-abortion. He is pro-union. He is very much in love with the tariffs, which not a lot of Republicans are. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about this right now. Obviously, we just saw it work with Russia. Trump came out this week and said he was not happy with Putin. He said he was pissed at Putin. And he he claimed that he was going to put a 25% tariff, an oil tariff on Russia if they didn't come to the negotiation table to figure out something with Ukraine. Well, the next day, Russia said, all right, we'll come to the negotiation table, we'll try to figure something out. So in that case, he used tariffs as sort of a negotiating tactic, which is the idea behind it. And maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But I don't know a lot of Republicans who have been wildly in favor of tariffs the way that Donald Trump is economically. And so this just means that, the party is the Donald Trump party. It's not necessarily, he's also in favor of homosexuality, which is not a conservative position. But this is the problem when you sign too many deals with the devil, is that the devil will turn his back on you, because that's what the devil does. The union workers, they're focused on one thing and one thing only, which is money and power. I mean, those two things go together. And those things are what they vote for. Those things are what they care about. Those things are what they live for, to be completely honest with you. And in this election, the Crawford-Schimmel election here in Wisconsin, the big thing that everybody's talking about just immediately after the election is over is the fact that not a lot of those union workers got out to vote. Not a lot of these men, these blue collar men, union men, got out to vote for Schimmel the way that they got out to vote for Trump. And I think that makes sense, because Schimmel wasn't in favor. He wasn't outwardly in favor of unions in the way that Donald Trump was. And the union people, the union members, they don't vote for anything outside of their own selfish interest. And the Republican Party, for some reason, can't figure that out. Was listening to Charlie Kirk, which I don't listen to him all the time. I think he's interesting. I think he's generally, I think he's got good things to say. And he was talking on a live stream during the election, and just when they called the election, which was very early on, I think 35% of the votes were in and they called the election. So it was really no contest. But Charlie Kirk basically said that they didn't do a good job getting out there, getting people excited to vote, talking. And I don't actually think that that's the problem. I just think that we live in an incredibly immoral society. And the issue is that the Republican or the conservative party, I'm not going to say I'll say the conservative cohort within the Republican Party has given so much ground on so many different issues that it's no longer a conservative party. And right now, all that the political parties are here for is to serve different selfish and sensual and hedonist desires. And so that's what our culture has come to. It's like, whichever party is going to give me exactly what I want right now is the party that I'm going to vote for. And that's why you can't make deals with these people like the unions and the pro-abortionists, because they're not voting on principle. They're voting on arbitrary, ambiguous, very postmodern, fluid moral structures that they sort of make up as time goes on. That's why you can't trust them. That's why you shouldn't build your coalition and include them in that. I would rather lose on principle than win with people who are going to turn their back on you in 3 seconds when the other party promises them whatever they want. And that's what you're going to get with unions. You're going to get that with the suburban women who are voting solely on the basis of abortion, wanting to murder babies. I mean, we have to really think about this. Unions are rooted in the idea that you can just steal things whenever you want because you don't like the situation that you're in, which is immoral, which is wrong, which is completely outside of the conservative Judeo-Christian ethic system, the biblical doctrinal system of morality. You can't just steal things when you don't like it. And if the situation isn't good within a company, within a business, then yeah, I think the most just and the most honest and moral way of dealing with that is either by asking for them to change or by leaving, and either starting your own company and giving your workers better situation, or going to a different company who does give you a better situation. But going and stealing is not committing a crime or committing an immoral act. Doesn't actually, to me, seem like a good thing to do. And so the unions, of course, the philosophy is rooted in sort of liberalism, sort of sinfulness. And if you just let these people join your coalition just so that you can win. I mean, we're going to see the fallout of sort of the utilitarian, pragmatic. Sorry, thought I heard something. I thought I heard one of the kids. It is late. Sorry, you're seeing the fallout of some of the utilitarian, pragmatic methodology that the Republicans used in 2024, and I don't think that it's going to last very long. The Democrats are going to shift, and they're going to change, and they're very malleable because they don't have morals, because they don't believe in anything, and they're going to take advantage of just telling people what they want to hear and giving them a momentary feeling of satisfaction, and then winning elections because of that. That's one of the problems with the populist movement. It's one of the problems with the reactionary movement. I did like Trump. I think people should have voted for Trump. I think he was unequivocally, absolutely the lesser of two evils. He was getting rid, and he's been doing a fantastic job as a president. I mean, I just heard that he's working on defunding Planned Parenthood, the $700 million a year that goes to Planned Parenthood from the federal government. He's looking at defunding that, and that's fantastic. He's gotten rid of the Department of Education, which is the head of the state, now, or the head of the snake as far as destroying this country from within and destroying people's lives, destroying young people's lives. That is a good thing. Now each state needs to dismantle their Department of Education and give the rights back to the people, because these, or turn their Department of Education into actual truth seeking and biblical Christian departments, which would be very, very difficult. But if they could do that, then that would be fantastic as well. The reality here, though, is that that Trump he's a populist person. I mean, he signed a deal with the devil, multiple deals with the devil, and he had a moment in 2024 that was unlike any other political moment in American history. You had his opponents trying to put him in prison. They were trying to. You had the mug shot where he was where that like blew up and got super famous, got pissed everybody off because they're trying to put their political opponent in prison using lawfare. They tried to kill him. Somebody shot him. Two people tried to murder him. The whole situation, and then he had lost in 2020 during all of the craziness of COVID and the BLM riots, and there was questioning as to how Joe Biden could get the most votes in American history, which is a little bit weird. In my opinion, it's very weird, actually, that Joe Biden got the most votes in American history, based on the fact that he couldn't formulate a cohesive and coherent sentence for 4 straight years in the White House, and even when he was on the campaign trail. But regardless, this was one of the 2024 was like the stars aligning. Donald Trump came into this position in which the Democrats threw everything that they had at him. All of what they were doing was reactionary. All of it was, I don't like it when people say mean things, sort of emotionalistic, sensationalism, whatever you want to call it. And Trump, with the help of a bunch of very pissed off, very angry American people sort of in the rural areas, just took back the White House. And I think it is a monumental moment. But what I think it does is, I don't think it restores any sort of vision forward. I don't think it restores any sort of principled conservative party. I think it just kicks the can down the road. I think that if something drastic doesn't happen in these 4 years under Trump's administration, in our country's social imaginary, in our moral framework, if there's not some sort of revival morally, then I don't think that this situation with Donald Trump in 2024 is going to last very long. In 2028, the Republicans could lose again. Even though the Democrats are looking really, really bad as far as party favorability, I think it's dropped below 25% across the country. There is no true and comprehensive vision forward for the Republican Party. Right now, they're just focused on uncovering all of the fraud that happened under the Democrat regime for so long, and getting rid of sort of these Republicans who are addicted to war, who love war, who just want to just go kill everybody everywhere because they see that that's where the money is, that's the military-industrial complex. And look, there's no cohesive vision forward. I don't know what the Republican Party is right now. Like I've said in previous podcasts, it is just a slightly less liberal party than the Democrat Party in a lot of ways. Now, that has backfired in some sense because Trump has been doing some more conservative stuff. But as far as being like totally pro-life as far as being 100% against transgenderism, which he isn't. I think he's more like, don't do anything to kids, but adults can do that stuff, which I just think is ridiculous. I don't think adults or kids should be cutting themselves up because they have a mental delusion. That's really cruel and really evil to allow people to do that. And so I don't think that makes any sense. I obviously don't think that murdering babies is a good thing. I don't really care about the pragmatic argument. I don't care that people aren't going to vote for you if you don't allow for abortion up to X amount of weeks. I don't care about any of that. That is disgusting, evil, utilitarian nonsense. It doesn't align with conservative Christian values. It doesn't align with the Bible. It doesn't align with the truth. It doesn't align with reality. It doesn't align with natural law. It doesn't align with anything. It's just arbitrary, liberal, sinful ideology. And I have a problem with that. I don't think that we have a cohesive economic policy. Personally, I don't think that the Republican Party is very economically unified. Obviously, now with the unions being involved in some way, like how long is that going to last? Is that going to continue into 2028? Is that going to continue into the 2030s? When are we going to get rid of the unions who are, by the way, and this is maybe a podcast for a different time, but you cannot separate economic philosophy and political and social philosophy in politics. You can't just say I'm a social Republican or social conservative and economic liberal, or I'm an economic conservative and a social liberal, which is kind of one of the arguments that a lot of people say. They'll say, well, I want less government spending, but I let anybody can do whatever they want. The sort of libertarian, just get the government out of our way. Give me my money and let people do whatever they want, which is what Francis Schaeffer predicted back in the 1970s. He said, this is what society is going to basically devolve into, is people who care about two things: affluence and personal peace, money and get out of my way. Do whatever you want. I'm going to do whatever I want, which is the argument that a lot of people make, a lot of Republicans make, is, yeah, well, if other people want to get married to the same sex, if they let them do whatever they want to do, but I'm going to do what I want to do. And I just want the government to stop spending my money because I want my money and I want to do whatever I want to do with my money. And that's sort of the philosophy right now of the right. And in some ways, it's a philosophy of the left, although the left has some more communism / they have a lot more a communal aspect to it, a big government controlling the means of production, and a more Marxist philosophy and underlying postmodern philosophy. And so they want to centralize all of the power in the government so that they can basically control everybody's lives, because they're all actually fascist. They are like actually the fascists, not like these fake fascist claims that are made by the Democrats towards anybody who disagrees with them. Like the liberals are actual fascists. They actually just want to control everybody's lives. They want to murder babies. They want to make sure that your kids can't do homeschooling. They want to control every aspect of everybody's lives. They want to control the price of groceries. I mean, Kamala Harris, one of her brilliant, genius campaign talking points in 2024 was that she was going to help, I think, fix the cost of groceries or something like that with price fixing, which is totally insane. Like, who makes that decision? The elites, who they would love it. The elites would absolutely love it. Those people in ivory towers at Harvard and Yale, the great economists, and the people who write for the Wall Street Journal, they would all get in a room with Kamala Harris and they would say, eggs should cost $6.20 or eggs should cost $3.30. And they would determine the market, and then everybody would be in breadlines, and it would be Soviet Union 2.0. So that's sort of the left tendency, but personal peace, affluence, this is the idea. This is what everybody cares about. And so there is no vision forward for Republicans. There's no vision forward for conservatives. And there's all of these fractioning, weird schisming within Republicanism right now, because everybody came together in 2024 because things were getting too weird and too bizarre for everybody at the moment. They voted for Trump. Trump is kind of running this very kind kind of whatever he thinks is the right thing to do is what he's going to do, which as of right now, he's done a lot of really good things. I don't argue with it, but he's a person. He's not a Christian. He's sinful. He could do something wrong. Everybody knows that. And so again, there's just no vision. There's no vision forward. Nobody knows what the Republican Party is. You've got Elon Musk, who's certainly has no philosophical or theological basis for his thinking. He's very economic focused. He's very much get the government out of our way and stop spending. And, it's fine to some extent, but, I want the government to serve the people. I want the government to uphold the institutions that the people create, the institutions that are the family, the church, the state governments. And so I don't necessarily just want for all of the government to go away. I'm not a libertarian. I want there to be competent government that is governed by God. And so I don't want there to be, I've heard the argument that you shouldn't get rid of. I think this is what Patrick Deneen said when there was conversations about getting rid of the NPR National Public Radio. He said, missed opportunity for the Republicans. What we should do is we should rebrand it into a conservative radio station or something like a conservative. The NPR is now like a conservative, right-leaning publication or whatever. And, I'm open to those ideas. I think that's interesting. And I think that, stuff like that should be tried. I think that we definitely should have some sort of a regime change in the United States because right now we're just completely immoral. But there is no vision. There is no vision, and your economic philosophy can't be separated from your social philosophy. They go hand in hand. Economics aren't just numbers. It's about how human beings interact with the market. It's about human interest. It's about what they believe in. It's about what people will buy. They'll interact with. They'll trade. They'll create. They'll innovate in the areas of the economy that they believe are most beneficial to other people. And so if I go out and I start a nonprofit that helps people with hurricane relief because I'm a Christian, that is a nonprofit in which there's an exchange of finances. I have to go get funding to go out and help people for hurricane relief in Florida. And I'm doing this because I'm a Christian and I believe that it's a good thing to go help people and to go, take care of the poor and take care of the needy and the sick. And so there's a philosophical anchor to that economic movement, and you can't detach the two. No matter how much you think you can, that's just illogical and nonsensical. And there's really no philosophical framework for that sort of thinking other than a sort of a Marxist framework, which doesn't actually practically and functionally work. So the Republican Party needs to figure out what it actually is. And I think that that's one of the reasons why Brad Schimmel lost this election and why I think some more Republicans, especially in these swing states, are going to continue to lose. And we actually talked about this. One second. We talked about this in my podcast with Leah Savas, who after the 2024 elections, there was a lot of, there were 10 states who were I think red states, Republican states, who were also voting on in the 2024 November election. They were also voting on abortion referendums for their constitutions, and 7 out of 10 voted in favor of changing the abortion laws so that it would be more pro-abortion, even though these are red states that voted for Donald Trump. So you started even immediately seeing that disconnect between the classical, maybe Republican Christian ideal. I'm not saying that that's what it actually was, but this sort of ideal or this evangelical Protestant ideal that was behind the Republican Party sort of begin to detach under the shadow of Donald Trump from any sort of convictional and bedrock philosophy that's unchanging. And so you just saw people vote for Donald Trump, who they saw was sort of going to give them more money and get rid of government waste and go after the Democrats because they're using lawfare against people and try to get rid of transgenderism so they couldn't mess with their kids. But they're also going to vote for people to go murder children. And that's doesn't make any sense. There's no coherency there. Like, what is that? What was happening there? Why are you voting in favor of some things that are good, and then you're also voting in favor of like the worst thing ever, which is child sacrifice? What is going on? Nobody can explain that. So that's a problem. I'm looking at the numbers right now real quick. There are 95% of votes in, 45.6% going to Brad Schimmel, 54.4% to Suzanne Crawford. Next thing, yeah. So anyways, that's sort of my whole shtick on the Republican Party right now. I think it's an absolute disaster, and a lot of people are going to be telling you, yeah, well, here's why it was strategy. We didn't have enough people on boots on the ground, yada yada yada. It's actually not the problem. The problem is that there is no cohesive, coherent, straightforward ideology or vision forward for Republicans to get behind other than Donald Trump. And those people who sort of aren't beholden to Donald Trump right now, or aren't totally in with Donald Trump, or don't talk like Donald Trump, or don't act like Donald Trump, or aren't as abrasive as Donald Trump is, they aren't going to get elected. And so the elections become a matter of who is the most abrasive, who has the most intense personality, who is the most outrageous, who's going to say the craziest stuff. And, that's how somebody like Lauren Boebert got elected, who's an idiot. Well, Lauren Boebert could not probably say the alphabet in order. I don't know if she actually could. She's like caught on camera, a couple of years ago, being groped in the middle of a movie theater by some dude that's not her husband. Like, these people, there's another lady, I can never remember her name. Doesn't matter. There's people who are very, very angry. I'll give a story, like, who are very angry, who are very reactionary, who have those strong personalities, who then get voted in because people are running off of emotion, and they're saying, we want the government out of our way. We want money. We want personal peace. We want affluence. We don't want to deal with anything. And so whoever's going to go out and fight those battles for us, because we don't want to fight them, we'll put those people in office. And oftentimes those people are just the loudest, dumbest people you can imagine. And I'm not saying that about Trump. I don't think Trump is that way, but I think that there are groups of people who follow Trump who are stupid people who are not able to think properly, who actually don't understand economics to any degree, who have not been successful at all, and who have not been, who have no philosophy, moral philosophy. They'll throw the I'm a Christian out there to get voted, but they're not, and they don't live like a Christian. And so that's a problem. There's so much distortion. There's so much unrest. There's so much confusion within the Republican Party right now that there is no vision forward, and there is nothing to sort of point at and say, this is our like foundational framework of thinking. We are Christian, and we're going to die on these 3 or 4 hills. We don't care what you say, Democrats. We don't care if we don't get voted in. We think murdering babies is wrong. And we're not just going to be pragmatic or utilitarian about it. We're going to be very straightforward. I mean, this is the greatest injustice that any civilization has ever perpetrated in the history of humankind. Nobody has ever slaughtered 60 million babies, probably more. Nobody has ever done that in human history. And so we're dealing with something that is completely immoral, and the only party that would have any sort of guts to say something about it, which would be the Republican Party, because the Democrats don't care. They are, they lust after murdering babies. That's what they think about. That's what they dream about. They're sociopathic narcissists, and they have nothing else to live for other than slaughtering kids and making money and ripping everybody off and stealing and doing whatever immoral thing that comes into their mind in the moment. But nobody, like the Republican Party should be saying something, and they're not. They're not doing anything, really, to be honest with you. They're sort of just sidestepping that issue. Like, we're not going to talk about that. Well, if you don't talk about any of the issues, if you don't talk about any of the actual moral problems, you're actually just going to become the people that you're trying to defeat, which are the Democrats. And the Republican Party are the Democrats of 15, 20 years ago. They're the Democrats. Even Obama gave lip service to, homosexuality is wrong back in the early 2000s. Same with Biden. They didn't believe it, obviously, but they at least said it. And so the Republican Party is as conservative, as the Democrats were 15 years ago, which is not very conservative. But enough of that. It's just terrible to think about. We'll move on to Suzanne Crawford. Who is she? I did a Orthodoxy in Order newsletter last week, or I think it was last week, in which I kind of broke down the main points from each candidate. And, Crawford is your classic liberal. She's pro-murdering babies. She's pro-transgenderism, pro-immigration without documentation. She wants to eliminate school choice. She wants to end parental rights. She wants to remove voter ID. Endorsed by Tammy Baldwin. She's your classic Democrat. She's literally the worst possible person you could ever have on the courts. And I probably didn't mention this at the beginning, but the reason this is an important election is because... well, here's how it was. It was that if Schimmel won, the courts would be split 3-3. So we would still be sort of a battleground state in which, things could go either way. You'd have conservative and liberal judges, and they would be having to, they'd be balancing each other out, which is better than what it is now, which is a 4-3 majority for the liberals. And the courts are very important. I know a lot of people don't understand how our government works, but what happens there, and this is a 10-year term, by the way. So she's going to be in this position for 10 years. And these people determine the laws. They determine sort of how our state functions on the legal level, and they can overturn things. They can think about Roe v. Wade, where they overturn Roe v. Wade, or they help implement different laws or enforce different laws. It's just the judges are sort of the moral foundation for a state. They're supposed to help judge on moral issues related to economics and social issues. And Crawford is the worst possible person you could ever want doing that. She wants to murder kids. She wants to cut kids up. She is not in favor of school choice. So if your kid is in a bad school district and can't think, which, by the way, every school district is a bad school district, but if your kid is in a particularly bad school district and you would like for them to be able to move to a different school district, you would drive them there. You would move, and you don't want to move your family to that school district. Well, you just can't, because Suzanne Crawford says that you can't, and the liberals say that you can't. And so these are sort of important issues. There's and so anyways, these are important issues. And now there's a liberal 4-3 majority. You look to the state just to the west of us, Minnesota. They are completely overrun by Democrats. They're completely overrun by liberals, and they're one of the most immoral states in the entire country, if not the most. Them and California are having a fun little battle for most immoral and just horrific place to live in the entire world. That was a little bit too far in America, but they're pretty bad. Probably maybe in the entire world, because I don't know if anybody else is committing the crime of abortion. I guess China, at the rate that Minnesota and California are. But China is doing terrible stuff. So whatever. In the United States, Minnesota is murdering children after they're born. That's happening, and you can look on the website. I've linked to all of that before in earlier podcasts on the Minnesota government. They actually keep tabs on that. They want to know how many babies they've murdered. They're a sanctuary city for kids who want to come there and get chopped up and butchered and mutilated by, demons in the healthcare system. They're a sanctuary city, or a state. So if you're in Wisconsin, or if you're in South Dakota and you're a kid and you want to be your boy, you think you're a girl, and you can't get the procedure done at home or in your home state, well, you can go to Minnesota. They'll protect you, and they'll cut you up and destroy your life and defend you in the process, which makes no sense at all. And it's disgusting and it's cruel. And this is where Wisconsin is headed, inevitably. And one of the big things that I think Christians should be focused on, apart from the fact that we're just going to be slaughtering infants for, a very long time going forward here in Wisconsin, is there was this article that came out March 18th, 2025. I'll link to it in the description, called "Liberal Judge Suzanne Crawford's Husband Promotes Lawfare Against Homeschool Families." This is on the Federalist. Progressive Judge Susan Crawford is running for a seat in the Wisconsin Supreme Court. Her husband wrote a book against homeschooling. Basically, you can read it. I mean, it's not a very long, article, but basically they just want to get rid of homeschooling, and they want to bring it either under the jurisdiction of the state, so that the state has all of these requirements that you would have to basically be beholden to if you wanted to do homeschooling for your own kids, and one of those requirements would be that your kid would have to go to a public school half the time, so part-time, and or they just want to get rid of it altogether because they believe that they believe that the state is the arbiter of all truth. The state should be controlling your kid's life. The state should be controlling your life, and the state should be telling your kids what to think and who to vote for and what philosophies and what's moral and what to believe in. And that's the state's job. That's not your job as a parent. That's the state's job. And right now there are 30,000 kids in Wisconsin who are homeschooled, and these people, they want to take that away. They want to take that away from you. They might. I mean, she probably will try to do this. Democrats are kind of in control of the state, and they are very good at destroying things very quickly. And they will take your rights away, and they will destroy your families, and they will take your children. They will. That's a fact. That's what they're doing now. And if you think that that's a crazy conspiracy theory, you're an idiot, and you need to actually do some reading, because it's in law in a lot of these liberal states. Obviously, you have Minnesota, I just talked about. You have California, you have New York. These places are horrible. These places are totalitarian. They will take your kids, they will cut them up, and they will not let you have them back. We have gotten to a point in the United States in which everything is so ideologically. There's such a deep divide between the liberals and the true conservatives. Like there's no cohesion. I have nothing in common with the liberals, and the liberals have nothing in common with me. Like, I don't want the state to do anything. I don't want them to run my kids' lives. I don't want them to take them out of homeschooling. I don't want them to butcher my kids. I don't want them to take my kids away from me if I don't want them to be butchered. I don't want my kids to be murdered. I don't want other people's kids to be murdered. I think that that's wrong. And so there's no agreement. There's no union. There's nothing there, that we have nothing in common. And this is the recipe for disaster. But this is the person that was just voted in, Suzanne Crawford. She's a radical progressive leftist. She hates conservatism. She hates Christianity. She hates the truth. She hates you. She hates your children. I mean, these are facts. You can just look them up. She's never going to come out and say, I hate humans, or I hate your kids, or I hate you. She's going to tell you she loves you the same way that liberals always do. I love you so much. Let me just slaughter your kid, and let me cut your children up, and let me steal all of your rights from you, and let me take your business from you as well, and let me ruin your life and throw you in prison. But I love you so much, and I hope that you know that I love you. But let me also just, butcher that other kid of yours. And, that's how they work. They look at you in the eyes, they lie to your face. They tell you how much they love you and care for you. And then they actually do the opposite. And for some reason, Republicans and conservatives cannot understand that. They just cannot understand that. They just think, well, nobody would do that. Nobody would. There's not actually post-birth abortions in Minnesota. There's not actually, yes, there are. Go in and look at each year they do the statistics. They literally tell you in the documentation how many babies, post-birth babies, or failed abortions there have been, in which they take the baby, they put the baby in a room by itself, and they let it die. They do that. They tell you that. They're not afraid to tell you that. And then when they go out on the national stage like Tim Walz does, and he gets called on it, he calls everybody a liar. But he knows that he can just call you a liar because you're not going to go look it up. You're too dumb. You don't care. You don't actually care. You just want to hear whatever's going to tickle your ears and make you feel good. And that's the case for the majority of Americans in this country right now. They don't actually care about what's actually true. They just care about hearing what they want to hear. And so they'll just listen to whatever politician tells them whatever they want to hear that day. And then they'll vote on the basis of that. And so we've got a big problem. But yeah, Suzanne Crawford is another manifestation of that. She's a horrific, evil person. And she's going to be one of the key points one of the key factors in turning Wisconsin into another Minnesota. And that's very sad because Wisconsin, generally speaking, was always sort of, in the middle. I feel like for a long time it leaned red, but, it would go blue sometimes. But it's one of these swing states. And I just don't think it's going to be anymore because I don't think that we have morality in this country. And I think that that's the big problem. So I'll move on to my final point, which I actually think is the most important point. We obviously don't have any clue where the Republican Party is going. I would love to know. I'd love for somebody to try to set a vision forward that is philosophically and theologically grounded in truth and in reality. I would love for that. That would be nice. We know who Crawford is. She's a terrible person, and she's going to do whatever she can to destroy this state. And then my final point is strictly for Christians, because I am a Christian. I've lived in Wisconsin my entire life. I've lived in Dane County, Madison. I know the Christian scene. It's horrific. It's bad. And Wisconsin, Minnesota, these Northwestern states are full of cowardly and useless and evil pastors who will not stand up for the truth no matter what. They will continue to let people. We are at the point in society, in politics, in which we need to start excommunicating people from the church who are voting for these sorts of people. That's not out of line with the Bible. I will debate anybody on this. By the way, nobody wants to debate. No, I won't talk about that. I will debate anybody on that. We are at the point in which you cannot make an argument. You cannot call yourself a Christian and make an argument for your salvation and for your faith if you are voting for and advocating for and promoting the murder of innocent human beings, of any human being, really, to be honest with you, but of innocent, unborn human beings, and you're advocating for and voting for and promoting the butchering and mutilation of children and the state's ability to take people's children away from them. You are not a Christian if that's what you're doing. And if you are a pastor who does not say that stuff unequivocally, if you are a pastor who does not speak about issues of transgenderism and homosexuality, and if you are a pastor who does not actually take action against those things, if you're taking action in favor of those things, then you are not a Christian pastor. You do not go to a Christian church. You understand this? This is a fact. There's no biblical argument that you could ever possibly make. That's why I kicked my co-host off this podcast a year ago, Nick Gibson, who's an apostate as far as I'm concerned. He's an apostate. He's not a Christian. He does not run a Christian church. High Point Church of Madison, Wisconsin is not a Christian church. They partner with and they promote these evil people at End Times Ministries, people like Sheila Stubbs, who is a Democrat representative for the state of Wisconsin, who's pro-homosexuality, pro-transgenderism, pro-slaughtering babies, who has been publicly promoted and supported by Planned Parenthood, who voted to repeal the 1878 or something like that law that made all abortions illegal after Roe v. Wade was overturned. On the federal level and the rights were given back to the states, she voted in favor of abortion. She is not a Christian, but she is a lead pastor, one of the leader pastors at the church that High Point Church gives money to, gives a building to. High Point Church is one of the biggest churches in Dane County, biggest churches in the city of Madison. And Nick Gibson, the pastor, he's the head pastor. He's the lead pastor. He used to be on this podcast for 4 years. He was on this podcast. I know him very well. He's an apostate. He doesn't believe the gospel. He believes that you can give money to people who want to kill babies, who want to murder babies, who want to cut them up. That's what he believes. He believes this unequivocally. You cannot make an argument against it. He'll give you lip service. He'll talk. No, I don't believe that, but he does because he gives money to it and he promotes it publicly, and he communes with these people. Nick is not the only example. Obviously, all of his shill pastors that he has on his staff, Adam Darbone, Devin White, Mike Beresford, those people, and the other people on his staff who I'm not going to name, but. And then I can't, and all the elders as well, who are just complete shills. They'll just do whatever he tells them to do. And they will never speak up and never speak out about the truth because there are bad things happening behind closed doors at that church. You have other churches too. in Madison who are prominent, big evangelical churches. You have Blackhawk Church run by Matt Metzger, who is that church is apostate. That church they are not Christians. This is not a Christian church. If you go into that church, good chance you're not a Christian, actually. So you need to leave that church and go to a Christian church. They support transgenderism. They support homosexuality. They support same-sex marriage. They support everything. They support abortion. They won't tell you this. Well, they're more open to telling you this than other churches. Other churches are a little bit more subtle about it. But yeah, you have pastors and these are just, you can look these places up. You can look these churches up. I've been here my whole life. I know these people. I know these pastors. You have pastors who just shut their mouth. They never want to talk about things all over the state, all over each county. There's so many pastors in this state who just don't tell the truth. They just won't do it. And so that's why you have so many Christians who are voting for Democrats right now. So many deluded, self-proclaiming Christians who aren't actually Christians, because it's also self-evident as to why you shouldn't vote for people who want to murder babies, who want to murder kids, who want to, cut their heads off and poison them. That's what you're voting for, by the way. If you're one of these people, which I don't know how many of those people are listening to this podcast, but if your church isn't talking about these issues, if they're not actually taking a stand, then you're not going to a church that is led by the Holy Spirit, that is actually biblical, that is actually walking in step with the Spirit. You're not doing it. Like there's other churches in Madison that I would love to call out, but I'll save it. I'll talk about the ones that I'm most closely sort of associated with, or have been connected, have been closely associated with, who just lie through their teeth and tell you whatever the hell they think you want to hear, because they hate you and they hate the truth and they just want power and money and affirmation, and they're insecure, and there's a million reasons. And they'll just tell you to shut your mouth if you ever ask any questions about it, or they'll just talk in circles and tell you how you're not being loving if you don't just, let people murder babies and do whatever they want. So, that's the state of the church in a lot of this state of Wisconsin. There are good churches. There are good pastors. I'm not saying there aren't. And I hope that people who listen to this podcast who are from Wisconsin go to those churches and they listen to those pastors. But what I hope mostly is that people start reading their own Bible, start thinking for themselves, start praying, start asking God, what is true, what is right, what is good? How should I live? Like, is it okay to live in this delusion that you can vote for, advocate for, and promote ripping children's heads off, ripping babies' arms off their bodies, poisoning children, cutting kids' genitals off? Like, is that actually what you want? Is that actually what you think Christianity is all about? Because if you do, you don't believe in Jesus Christ, the one of the Bible, the Christian Bible. You can't, because that's not Christianity. Murdering is evil. It's against the law of God. It's against the commandments of Christ to love your neighbor and to love God. It's against both of them. It's against everything. It's against the entire framework of the Bible. It's against the entire birth, life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. It is against everything that the Bible stands for. And now we've got this political problem here in the United States, and we have it in Wisconsin, because pastors in the evangelical and Protestant churches across the country are cowards and they're losers, and they hate the truth, and they will do anything to maintain what little tiny, insignificant, petulant power and affirmation and status that they think that they have, that actual people don't care about. And it's like, most people don't know who these churches are in Madison. Most people don't care about High Point Church. Most people don't care about Blackhawk Church. Most people don't care about the rest of the churches in Madison. But you get enough churches to shut their mouth and to say nothing and to do nothing when you have a political party murdering children, cutting kids' genitals off. You get enough churches to shut up, then you're going to get a tyrannical, horrific, vile, and disgusting government who will do anything to destroy your life, because that's what sin does. It destroys, it kills, it steals, and it destroys. It's a manifestation of the devil itself. You have to understand this. I'm like completely beside myself, because I've just noticed more and more and more and more and more as time has gone on that Christians cannot understand this for some reason. And they will not engage with the debate with anybody who disagrees with them and their stupid little ideology that you can vote for child murdering sociopathic idiots who want to ruin people's lives. You are not a Christian if you think that. Period. You're not. And you cannot make an argument. You cannot make a biblical argument. I invite you on the podcast to try. You won't, because you're a coward. And most people who are liberals are cowards. They have no basis. It's all arbitrary nonsense. There's no philosophical basis. There's none. There's no basis. I've read your literature that you haven't read because you're a complete and total imbecile. Most liberals are imbeciles who don't think, who are just on their phone all day scrolling through crap. They don't read books. They don't do anything. They just scroll. Don't think. I don't want to talk about the real issues. Personal peace, affluence, money. I want money. I want power. I want control, but I don't want to think about the issues. I want to have stuff fed to me. I want instant gratification. I want social media. I want the likes. I want all that, but I don't want to actually have to think for myself. I don't actually do anything. I don't want to read my Bible. I'm going to go to church on Sunday. I'm going to let some pastor who I don't know, who I'll never know, tell me whatever the hell he wants to tell me because credentialism is my God. And if you have a degree and if you have a PhD and if you have a master's degree, then you have to know what you're talking about. And that's the God of the left, credentialism. It's the God of the millennials. Yes, the whole entire generation. I know it was like, wow. Yeah. The whole entire generation. It's credentialism. They care about credentials. They don't care about merit. And I wouldn't like merit either if I was a millennial. There's not much merit in that generation. But look at what's happening. Like this is evil. I'm not in favor. I'm gonna say something, and I don't know who this guy really is. I listened to the Tucker Carlson podcast, and he recently had a guy on from Minnesota. He was from Minnesota. He moved over to Tennessee. They're like starting some weird thing out in Tennessee with a bunch of Christians. I don't really care for it, but his name is Andrew something. I don't really care what his name is. He was a pastor in Minnesota in a small town. And when they were putting this law into place in Minnesota in which you could murder babies after they've been born, he went to, say something at the sign. I don't know exactly how it worked, but he went to the Capitol to basically give a speech or to talk about it. And he got there, and to his surprise in Minnesota, he was the only pastor that showed up to this thing. The only pastor out of how many people live in Minnesota? Millions of people, thousands of churches. One of the biggest churches in the entire country, Grace Church, is in Minnesota. John Piper's church is in Minnesota. Okay. You have big churches. You have big ministries. He's the only one that showed up to this. The only one. I don't know his theology. I just know what I've heard in that. But how is it that one pastor is showing up to this? Would Spurgeon have showed up? Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just don't want to hear comparisons between John Piper and Spurgeon. And no, John Piper is not Spurgeon. Because John Piper can't see a political problem in front of his face. He's politically illiterate. He doesn't know. He has no understanding of what's happening in the world around him, which is going to have a massive impact on how people think about him theologically going forward. I have a hard time reading him because he can't condemn evil. It's like he has such a difficult time condemning actual practical political evil in the world that he lives in the state that he lives in, right in the back door. You're not going to go talk about that. You're not going to go talk about the fact that they're going to go slaughter children. And all of your institutions, the seminary, Desiring God, your churches, they're all there. He's got a prominent voice. Why doesn't he go say something? Why doesn't the pastor of Grace Church go say something? Because there's one answer for that. They're cowards. That's a fact. You can't disagree with that. I don't really care what anybody says anymore. This is insane. We're voting for people who want to slaughter innocent human beings, and nobody in the church seems to care about it. And pastors don't seem to care about it. And so I'm just going to keep talking about that until, I lose every single follower and nobody wants to listen to me. Although I've gained more followers than lost over the last year. So that's been surprising, but I'm just going to keep saying this stuff because it has to be said. Somebody has to say this stuff. Like, what is this? Like, really? Pastors can't figure this out? Should I merge? Should I tell my congregation that there's an election happening this week and one of the people wants to decapitate babies and rip their arms and legs off of their body and poison them and murder them, and then the other guy doesn't want to do that? By the way, the other lady who wants to kill all the babies, she also, if any of these babies ever happen to get born, if they're actually become like functioning members in society, or even if they just turn like 6 or 7 one day, she wants to like cut their genitals off or steal them from their parents if they think that they're the opposite gender. And the reason that they would think that they're the opposite gender is because she wants to force all of them to go to the government schools and have no opportunity to be educated by their parents. Or do we vote for the guy who just doesn't want to do that stuff, who thinks that stuff is evil and wrong? Like, why don't pastors say this stuff? Like, hey guys, you can't vote for the one that wants to do all this evil stuff. If you're doing that, you're not a Christian. I would love to hear an argument. You don't. Nobody has an argument. You don't have an argument for that side of things. You don't, and nobody will ever be able to have a cohesive, coherent argument as a self-proclaimed Christian. I mean, you have. I'll do a whole podcast on this stuff at some point, but Crossway, self-proclaimed conservative, Christian, Reformed, promoting Ray Ortland. Ray Ortland promoted Kamala Harris as like the biggest Kamala Harris fan of all time. One of the biggest ones that's ever existed. I mean, there are not many, but he was one of the biggest ones. And they're putting his book out there. They're promoting. This guy wants to kill babies. He wants babies dead. That's a fact. He literally promoted this stuff. Why is Crossway promoting that? Like, you wonder why I haven't had any more Crossway authors on the podcast. And I hope I probably won't anymore, because that's disgusting. That's just disgusting. It's so unbelievably disgusting. There's nothing good to be said about it. There's no other words to use other than that is just sick and disgusting stuff. And anybody who promotes this stuff, anyone who promotes these disgusting people like Ray Ortland, anyone who does that is blind, spiritually bankrupt. They have nothing that I would ever want to promote on this podcast. And so, yeah, I am very frustrated. Not because my guy didn't win or whatever. That's like, I don't care about that. The Republican, I'm very frustrated with the Republican Party. What I care about is the fact that a bunch of babies are going to be slaughtered in the United States, and laws are going to be put into place in which the government can probably take your kids. And that's happening in Minnesota. It's going to happen in Wisconsin, and abortion is just going to continue to expand and expand and expand until it's going to be 9 months. That's what happens. It never ends. It's a slippery slope. It never ends. They continue to take. They take and they take and they take and they take. That's what they do. It's a cancerous ideology. Sin is cancerous. Look, let me just tell you about, and I'll be done after this. I got like chapped lips and I need to go to bed. It's almost midnight. Tocqueville. Some of you might not know who Tocqueville is. And that's okay. He wrote a book called, Democracy in America. He's a French philosopher. He came to the United States in the 1800s to see what all the hype was about. And he had a quote in this book, I believe, and I'm trying to pull it up. So he had a quote, and it's one of my favorite quotes. And so he comes to America. He's trying to figure out what makes America so incredible. You know, they're becoming an industrial superpower, becoming an economic superpower. They're a brand new country. It's like a land of opportunity. People are coming from all over the world to come and live here. Why is this great? You know, and this guy he's from France. They're coming out the French Revolution. Things didn't really go well. And so here's what he says. Tocqueville says this. He says, I sought for the greatness and genius of America in her commodities, harbors, and her ample rivers, and it was not there. In her fertile fields and boundless prairies, and it was not there. In her rich mines and her vast world commerce, and it was not there. Not until I went to the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the secret of her genius and power. America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. It's prophetic. It's the truth. If America ever ceases to be good, she'll cease to be great. And that's where we are right now in the United States. There's no fire from the pulpits. There's no righteousness. There's no truth. There's no biblical truth. Pastors don't give a trash in the evangelical church and a lot of Protestant churches about righteousness, holiness, godliness, living as faithful stewards of the faith, being willing to die and lose everything for the faith the way that every Christian up until 15 minutes ago did. Like, we don't have that. We have cowards in skinny jeans, like shirts buttoned down to their whatever, to their belly buttons, talking about like no hair on their chest because they're all effeminate, talking about Jesus loves you, just God loves you so much. That's what we have. That's what we have in the United States. We have sellouts like, my co-host of this podcast, who's going to promote churches who want to murder children, who have pastors who want to slaughter human beings. That's what we have in the United States. We have no fire from the pulpits. We have no preaching of the righteousness of God. The fact that you need to live up to that, the fact that you have a responsibility as a human being, as a Christian, to try to live as morally upright as you possibly can by the power of the Holy Spirit. We don't have that in the United States. We have nothing like that. We have the most unbelievable immoral society that has ever existed. And I will never stop saying this until we stop being immoral, and no one will ever be able to prove me wrong because I have one statistic that trumps everything that anybody could say is the fact that we've murdered 60 million babies in 60 years. You can't argue with that. That's a fact. And no other society has done anything even near that. We've done more than 60 million, by the way. We have 1 million babies frozen in embryos, commodities, because America, we care about personal peace and affluence. So yeah, you want to have a baby, go kill 10 babies, throw the other couple in a freezer forever, and then you get your one kid. Hopefully it was worth killing a bunch of kids and throwing the other ones in a freezer. That's great. And you have Christians who, this is a moral conundrum. Is IVF really bad? No. Yes. Yeah, it is bad. Yeah. Yep. It's bad. There's your answer. I need to stop. It's way too late and I can't continue to do this. I'm frustrated. Obviously, I'm frustrated. Christians should be frustrated. The future is not great. It's not bright. America is not going in a positive direction. Wisconsin, sadly, isn't going in a positive direction. And I'm not really mad because the Republicans didn't win. I don't really care about all of that. I think that the conservative party is a movement that we need to vision forward. But what we just did in this state is morally reprehensible, and it's contrary to everything that is true and good and right. And that's, I guess, what we get is what we deserve. So yeah, I agree with Tocqueville. America will cease to be good. America is great because she is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. Yeah. Well, that wraps it up for this one. We're going to have some interesting podcasts coming up. I'm going to continue to talk about things like this. I have some really cool guests coming up. So if you haven't subscribed, go subscribe on Spotify, Apple, YouTube channel, wherever. If you've gotten this far in the podcast, go to orthodoxyandorder.com. That's my Substack. I just send out a weekly newsletter, kind of goes through the 5 to 7 top stories of the week. I think it's pretty good. I think some people like reading it. Some people don't, whatever. I don't care. To the people who don't, you don't have to read it. But the people who do like it, I've heard from them. They've said, yeah, this is very good. I like reading this. And so if you want to get actual good Christian commentary on the news, not like the pour over, some of you might know what the pour over is. It's the cringiest, dumbest, most millennial thing ever. And I actually talked to the owner of that, the guy who created it one time. He's exactly what you would think he would be like. Anyways, go subscribe to that, orthodoxyanyorder.com. And yeah, we'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.